Hello. Hope you're doing well out there. I'm still getting used to the idea of recording these videos, so if this seems amateurish, it's because it is. Um, but I wanted to post another video. It's been a while, and I want to talk about more about my book and how it's going, and also some other insights. So here we go. So the book is going well. I have been lucky enough to receive some direct messages from strangers. Of course, friends and relatives are very supportive. And not to say that their support doesn't count, but it's more powerful to receive notes of encouragement from somebody who doesn't know me. So that's been really nice. If you're curious about where to buy the book, there's a link, of course. Um, I want to talk today, though, about my parents who are part of the subject of the book. They're definitely a big part of it. And their dysfunction. And if you've read the book or reading the book, or you even read what the book's about, you'll get the hint that it is about families and dysfunction. And I want to tell you about something I did later. The book takes place in 1975, but later in, must have been about 1990, the early 90s, um, I rediscovered meditation. Um, Curiously, I had been into meditation around age 15, 16, had my bedroom laid out like a Zendo and meditated, and I did Richard Hittleman's yoga book. But I kind of forgot about all that when I hit early adulthood, and you know, several things going on. I was, of course, night clubbing from about 84 to 87. And then I got serious about my creative projects and work and what I wanted to do with my life. And to that end, I moved to Los Angeles to pursue a singing career, which obviously did not work out, but I learned a lot about myself and the world. And in that space there, living in Los Feliz, a neighbor of mine and I started discussing meditation, and she said, "Well, why don't you come meditate where I meditate?" And what I didn't realize that it was the old Hollywood mansion uh, occupied by a group of Brahma Kumaris, which, if you don't know who they are, it's something you can Google. Um, some would call it a cult, some would call it an order, someone would call it a path. I'm not going to judge. And I certainly didn't become a Brahma Kumari. And the thing that was beautiful about them is that they didn't require me to join them or ask me to. And they provided their space for absolutely free and even served tea and nibblies after. So I meditated with them quite a bit. I went many weekends, many evenings. And it was the first time I really paid attention to the noise in my head. Their style of meditation is eyes open, called drishti, and also not trying to quiet your thoughts, but listening to your thoughts and exhausting them. Follow those tangents till they're exhausted. So that's what I did. And I realized during that time that the toxic impact of my parents' dysfunction on me. And a lot of the noise in my head were things that my dysfunctional parents had programmed, and beliefs and narratives about the world. And, you know, there were terrible things. There was a belief that the family was cursed, which I didn't know I had bought into until I started to meditate at the Brahma Kumari's mansion. And in one of those meditations and hearing all these thoughts and running these scenarios with my parents and the terrible fights and horrific scenes I witnessed as a child, I came up with this idea, which was to fire my parents as parents. Now, I've said that to a lot of people in my time, told this story before, and usually the reaction is they can't believe I would do such a thing. Oh, that's terrible. Fire your parents. That's terrible. And it's funny to see the movement now here in 2024, almost 2025, to um, distance yourself from parents. I see people talking about it. But back in the 1990s, I wrote a letter of dismissal to my parents, citing the reasons, which included some of this negative programming that I had in my head, these beliefs, these narratives, their toxic behavior, um, how terrible they were to one another, which inadvertently was abusive to me. I was abused directly by them, but the larger part of the abuse was the abuse they levied on each other that I had to witness, which was very damaging. Um, and was making me, well, because I bought into and believed these narratives, I was making some poor relationship choices as well. So anyway, I wrote this letter firing them. And at the end of the letter, though, I offered them a job. After firing them, I offered them another position as my friend, both of them as friends. And in my letter firing them as parents, I just explicitly outlined that if I'm going to take life advice from somebody, it's going to be from somebody who's rocking it, who loves life, loves their life, somebody who's walking the talk, somebody who's followed their own advice and has had things work out and they are thriving. And that's not to say blissful, because I don't think unending bliss is necessarily realistic. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you can be very happy in life and still have things that don't work out and just learn the lessons. And ultimately, things that seem terrible at the time often turn out to be the best thing for you. So that was sort of the background for why I was firing them. I just basically said, you're not qualified to parent me. And, I was approaching 30 years old. So whatever they could do for me as in a parental role was no longer viable for me at that age. So, I sent them the letter and, I kind of expect them to be really upset. And the beautiful thing is they weren't. I got to hand it to my mother and father. They understood it and they agreed to be my friends. And the beauty of this is we had a good friendship from there on. Now, there, of course, were other arguments and so forth. However, it's much different when you're arguing with a friend than you are with a parent. And you could say, how can you possibly separate them? But something about that letter, that decisive act, created enough space, helped me shift into a different gear with them and help them too. So after the letter was received, a few years later, in 1994, I moved back to Santa Barbara to pursue another goal of mine, which is as an oil painter. And I was over LA. We'd gone through the LA riots and all kinds of 1990 to 1994 in Los Angeles were very challenging years. So it all ended with a bang with a huge earthquake, and I was just done. So moved back to Santa Barbara to give my art career more attention. And at that point, the relationship with my parents was very different. My father and mother were living in Ojai, California, and my father would visit me, and we had a really nice friendship, and it remained that way until his death in 2002. And then from 2006 to 2019, I became my mother's sole caregiver. She lived in my guest house in another place in Sonoma County. And she was one of my best friends. And we talked about the letter, and she still understood. So if you're interested in reading the book and maybe finding out how I got there, some of it's in there. There are more stories. As I said, I'm practicing this uh, for making these videos and posting them on YouTube. So hopefully they'll get better. And I plan in the future to read some of my short stories that aren't in the book, and talk more about the dysfunction. And some of them are very hard stories to hear, but I really want to be open and vulnerable on this YouTube channel and hopefully provide something that's interesting or helpful to any of you out there. So once again, thanks for your time. This is Julian Lowenfeld signing off for now. Cheers.